So now that we know some of the different things that can pollute water, as well as where they come from or where they don't come from, let's talk a little bit about the laws that are there to protect us, but also protect these aquatic ecosystems. So the major piece of legislation that really protects our freshwater ecosystems is the Clean Water Act. And the Clean Water Act was released in 1972. And hopefully this year kind of rings a bell. The 1970s was a huge push in environmental regulation. This is when RCRA, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, passed, so that was regulating waste. This is when CITES was passed in the 70s. This is when the Endangered Species Act was passed. So a lot of environmental regulations are coming out in the 70s. And at this time, I mean, this was probably really the only piece of legislature that was protecting our water resources. We had other pieces, but they weren't as extensive as the Clean Water Act. And the Clean Water Act is something that we're still relying on and using today. The Clean Water Act is managed by the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA for short. And for the most part, I'm just going to be referring to them as the EPA. Now this law is protecting a lot of water bodies, but it's not protecting all of them. So for example, things that are not covered are farm irrigation canals, as well as agriculture and roadside ditches. So these are things that are artificially made. A farmer went out and dug a ditch and they filled it with water in order to water their crops. It's artificial. So a lot of artificial water bodies are just not covered. Another thing that's not covered related to this artificialness are artificial lakes and ponds. If you live in a neighborhood that has a pond in it, more than likely it's artificial. Actually, if you live anywhere in Maryland that has a pond in it, it is fake. There are actually no natural lakes in Maryland. All of them are fake. So fake water bodies aren't really covered. And then finally, dead-end streams. They're not very common, but if something changes, for example, a landslide or some geographic event changes, sometimes streams will be cut off from a major body of water. Most streams flow into larger streams that flow into larger streams, which flow into the ocean. But if they get disconnected, they are not protected by the Clean Water Act. The reason this exists is because, we make water bodies, but there's no way we could protect them all. There are so many artificial things out there that we literally don't have the manpower to cover all of those as well. Also, typically artificial water bodies are not being used by humans directly, so not ingesting them or bathing in them, or there's no organisms in there either. Maybe organisms were added to it because of humans, but for the most part, those weren't naturally occurring organisms in that body of water. So what does the Clean Water Act actually say? So, first thing, all states have to develop water quality standards for every single water body. Again, this is every single water body covered by the Clean Water Act. So streams, natural lakes, rivers, etc. If it's an agriculture ditch, they don't have to worry about it. So what water quality standards are is essentially saying, like, what should this water look like? And it's not the same everywhere. Water in one part of the state might look one way, but water in another part of the state might look a different way. There's, naturally good and naturally bad streams. So we're kind of recognizing that. Step 2. We need to identify which of those bodies of water are impaired, meaning they are not making those water quality standards. We have said there should be 2% nitrogen, but instead there's 5% nitrogen. So we need to identify that and put an identifier on that water body saying this is impaired. Finally, what states have to do is they have to create a TMDL. A TMDL is a total maximum daily load. And what this says is you can release X amount of nitrogen into this body of water. Now this is only done for impaired waters. And the reason this is done is because let's say a new company comes into the area and they have nitrogen waste. Well, this TMDL says you can only release 2% nitrogen. And they might say, well, we've got 10% nitrogen. Well, the state, under the Clean Water Act, can say, well, too bad, you can't release that waste there. That is unacceptable. You are not within standards. You are not allowed to reside here or waste here. So it gives states the authority to deny businesses or to deny organizations from polluting bodies of water if they're going to pollute over that total maximum daily load. And this is total maximum. So this is meaning not just one company, but it might be 2% nitrogen for all companies that are discharging into that river. Of all the companies, this is on a daily basis. So how much nitrogen you can get rid of every single day. And again, this is only designated for impaired waters. If the water is already clean based on the companies that are there, we don't really regulate it too much because obviously whatever that company is doing, it's fine. The water is fine. The link that you see here, this link, if you're interested in the different rivers of Maryland, this has the information on their water quality standards as well as TMDLs that are in place for those water bodies. Now, related to the TMDLs, so I mentioned before the TMDLs is a limit. So this is something the state has designated, 1 pound of nitrogen is reduced a day into the water body. And that's for all the businesses that are in that area. But how do you keep track of that? Business A is giving this much, business B is doing this much, business C is doing this much. That's a lot of work. And so what there is, in order to help with this, to keep track of businesses that are releasing into the water, is to create a permitting system. And that permitting system is referred to as the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES. And I'm going to refer to it as NPDES. So you're talking about pollutant discharges, such as nitrogen, and they're being eliminated. So eliminated into a water body. And this is not globally, this is nationally. So not just in Maryland, but in every state in the United States. So what this means is that if you are a point source, no matter what type of pollution you are releasing, whether it's a nutrient, whether it's some chemical, whatever it is, you have to get a permit. You have to go through your state government and say, hey, we produce fertilizer, sometimes we have extra, and we put it in the water. And you say, I think I release about 5 pounds of nitrogen fertilizer. Well, because we have this permit system in place, if the TMDL is, say, 10 pounds, but, oh, look at this permit. This guy also releases 5 pounds. This guy releases 2 pounds. We've actually already releasing 7 pounds into the environment. And if we give you a permit for 5 pounds, we actually go over that total maximum daily load. So it's a way to keep track of how much pollution is already entering the system and then kind of divvying it up. You're allowed 10 pounds of nitrogen. We are going to disperse that across these different companies. Now, this permit is very specific to the company. So the waste of that company is analyzed to see what pollutants are being released. And it's also specific to the water body. The TMDL is going to be different depending on which water body you're looking at. So let me kind of illustrate this because I know with all these numbers it can be kind of jumping around a little bit. So here we have a river. And let's see, we have company A. And company A is going to waste, say, 5 pounds of N. All right, here's another company. And I'm using the same numbers that I used in my previous example. And every day it already has a permit to release 2 pounds of N. Now a new company is coming in. And they know they're going to produce waste. And so because they're going to produce waste and because they want to put it into the river, they're going to have to get a permit. Let's say you're like, well, do they have to get a permit? No, I guess. But if they are caught discharging waste without a permit, you're talking some pretty serious fines. So for the most part, everyone's following it. So they come in, they're like, oh, hey, I also want to discard 5 pounds of nitrogen. I'm going to put a question mark here because this is kind of what they're asking. They're submitting a permit saying, here's how much I want to put into the water each day. And that will go to the EPA, or on the state level, it'll go to the EPA. And the EPA is going to look through that NPDES system. It's going to look through that discharge system and say, okay, looking at all the other guys, we see so far 7 pounds are released by these 2 people. okay, well, what's the TMDL? How much is allowed to be released? And so they look into their system, and they look and they see, oh, the water quality standards for this area is a 10-pound max. So if you want to release nitrogen, you can, but not that much. You can only release 3 pounds. So this company can either change its practices to only release 3 pounds, or they can decide to not open up to begin with. They'll be like, oh, actually, you know, we will go somewhere else where we can get rid of this 5 pounds of nitrogen because there's no other way we can do our business without it. So it's kind of a crash course into how our water quality standards work and how we regulate it. But again, this is point source. Point source is easy to regulate. I know this company is getting rid of this. I know this company is getting rid of this. It's not coming from a whole bunch of consumers.